Hey everybody, good evening. Welcome back to the CAF Plus channel. It's always good to be here for a collector interview. I hope you guys feel the same. I see many of you in the chat already out there, and talking. You're mentioning about Ron having an amazing Tales of Suspense cap splash. I think there's a few pieces in Ron's collection, Alberto, that you might think are amazing. We might see one or two of those tonight. You never know, I can tell you I've admired Ron's collection for quite some time. I'm going to put a link to his CAF gallery in the chat. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, go ahead and check that out. And while you're there, make sure you watch his CAF gallery and make it so that you can get alerts whenever Ron updates his CAF, because again, he's been a member of the site for over 18 years. He joined in the summer of 2007, so very, very long time member. He's seen a lot of iterations of the site, and he's still with us collecting. I run into him at shows every now and again, but we get to run into him tonight, right now. So let's bring him in here and get this thing started. Hey, Ron.
Hey, Bill. How we
Nice,
doing?
nice to see you. We've really never talked. I mean, we know each other. We've seen each other at shows. I've long admired your collection. It's definitely top 10, top 15 on the site as far as I think galleries that are out there. You've been on my watch list for a while. I know I've put a few likes on several of your pieces over the years, but so I just want to thank you for that. I mean, having an incredible collection like you have, it's wonderful when you have so many great things and you're willing to share those pieces. And I think that that's what CAF has always been about. And it's wonderful, the collectors that embrace that approach. So thank you.
Listen, CAF's been great for me. I mean, I've met a ton of people through CAF that I don't know how else I would have ever connected with, and it's been great. It's been great. It's been really helpful. So I don't have everything up there, but I try and throw stuff up, and I pride myself on that. I've kept something up every year over all these years. Some years more than others, but but anyway, CAF's great. I really appreciate everything you guys do. It's really helpful.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. And again, it's been fun watching your collection, grow over the years. And it's you're always like kind of on my list of people to ask. So I was glad when I reached out to you that you were free. So
Yeah, who knew?
yes. But so let's talk a bit about collecting, because I know when we get to look at the art, there's going to be some amazing pieces in here. I was telling you before the show started that there's you have so many wonderful examples that people would see, like many of these as like the perfect example from this era or this artist or this title. But I guess even before we start with the origins of how you got started collecting, I mean, when you're looking at art to buy these days, I mean, what are the criteria that you use for adding a piece to your collection when you have such a really nice collection to begin with?
So, so first of all, you have to be a little OCD about the whole thing. So that makes it a little worse. So I mean, so for example, I there's a comic strip called Rip Kirby by Alex Raymond. I read it all. I really like it, and I should be happy to have a few good examples. But I'm a little insane, and so I've got like 50, right? So there is that sort of weird thing that happens. But now, what I about probably 15 years ago, I actually made a list of what I really wanted to go after,
Hmm.
and um, and I've been terrible at following it, but I am trying to work through that list. And so now I'm at the stage where there's really not much left on that list, and if those pop up, great. Otherwise, I'm picking at holes, maybe trying to upgrade something. I'm the problem is I read comics all the time now, and so I buy new artwork, right, from new artists. It's not just old stuff. So as we go through tonight, I was mentioned before, it's kind of my collecting journey, and it really sort of started with what I was reading, and then I started diving further and further back in history because I really found that really really interesting about the hobby, and now it's kind of a balance between the old stuff and what I'm looking at now. So I think recently I just posted a complete issue from Batman Dark Patterns by Hayden Sherman is the artist,
Mhm.
also doing Absolute Wonder Woman in a what seems to me a totally different style, which is kind of cool. But I was reading that comic, I saw that issue, I thought that was just really just great artwork, and so here I am. I'm buying that now, right? So it's what's hitting me, and then it's filling in holes, or what I think are holes.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting that, you clearly have a, classic, silver, bronze age, and earlier than that kind of
Earlier.
focus collection, but the idea that you still find new artists and new art styles and things that interest you to collect them, and would you say it's more about the art than the story in some cases, or do they
So
both have to kind of be a part of it since, comics are stories at the end of the day?
yeah, what I think is the neatest thing about comics is that it's the world's only, in my mind, collaborative art form, right? It's the writer, it's the penciler, it's the inker, it's the letterer, it's the colorist. I mean, all these things sort of factor into the story of what you're reading and what you're getting out of it. So, when I think about my nostalgia for art, I guess it's from specific stories, and then from there the history and all that. But it's you know I don't find myself necessarily saying, oh, that's a great image of this. I do that sometimes, but I initially it was kind of like, well, I like that story, I like that run, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of collectors go through that. You might say, hey, oh, I like Captain America. Okay, great. You can find a good example of Captain America everywhere. And then you might say, reading a little bit, but actually, I really like Captain America. This guy John Byrne. I like when he does it. And by the way, there's John Byrne Captain America from in Avengers, and John Byrne Captain America and Captain America and other places. And people look at that and say, hey, that's good. I like, but you know what? This one looks different than this one. Oh, I guess, well, this one was inked by Dave Hunt, and this one's inked by McLeod. This one's by Joe Rubenstein. Oh, I like that one by Joe Rubenstein. Oh, let me read those stories. Oh, this run by Roger Stern writing with Byrne penciling and Rubenstein inking. That's what I really want. And then you find that, and then you say, okay, Captain America, that was great. How did he get here? What was before that? Oh, Kirby. There's this guy, and you work your way down, right? I mean, I think that's the process, right? It's if you find something, and if you enjoy it, which I do in that part, you sort of drive into something that's different and interesting.
As you can see, Alberto as the number one Cap fan on
It's the number one captain in the
no bad
world. That's fair. That's fair.
right, but I get you too. I think we're drawn to a lot of titles that we end up purchasing and reading. At least for me, back in the day when I was a heavy reader, it was the artist, it was the artwork, and then hopefully the stories were as appealing. I bought a lot of comics because Terry Austin inked them, not knowing if I was going to love it, but I knew that I was going to enjoy the artwork. And fortunately, I think by and large, I like most of the stories I read too, but yeah, it was always the art that drew me in first, and then I hoped for great storytelling as well, and usually that happened, that worked out, right? I mean, I think a lot of artists that we admire today brought so much of themselves to the stories that were being written. I mean, sometimes you could probably have a poorly written Avengers book and still, if Byrne was the one doing the art on it, irrespective of who was inking him, it would still have been a good story to go through and thumb through. But I want to go back to the one thing I've heard other collectors mention this, having a list, having a kind of a set of goals. That's one thing I've never been good at setting goals for myself in general. But with art collecting, it's like I try to just keep a mental list, and that doesn't work so good. You forget about certain storylines or certain artist inker combos that you've always wanted to get some representative piece by them. But I'm beginning to think I need a little bit better organization on that side of things, because I do think keeping a list is beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't been a great, I haven't done a great job of adhering strictly to the list, but but it has helped. It has helped me focus on things when there's two things up and one is on the list and one is really shiny and cool, it's going to help me lean toward the list a little bit more. The list has
Mhm.
evolved and changed over years. I mean, I actually have a decent amount of strip art. There was no strip art on the list when I first created it, and then added to it. I didn't have uh, any Eisner Spirit on the list when I wrote the list. I didn't really know about him at the time, right? And so,
Mhm.
but I learned about it, other things have been added.
Wow.
But yeah,
Marcus is saying you should release that list.
yeah, certainly not to this motley crew that's watching this. There's no way.
Oh man, but no, well, yeah, I think that that's a good approach. I think the thing that separates some collectors from others is having a strategy and approach to the hobby, right? Because like you said, there's a lot of shiny objects out there. Um, the artist bullpen has their December sale, for instance, and I went over there today and just started, browsing through stuff, and I'm like, oh, I really like that. Oh, I've always wanted to get something from this, from her, and it's just like you can't own everything, but you can go through and look at a lot of those shiny objects and say and really appreciate it, but then still not end up buying it. But it doesn't change your appreciation for the art. You just can't own everything. I think
Yeah,
it's cool that, like you mentioned, strip art wasn't on your list at all, but now you own quite a bit of it. And I think a lot of collectors who kind of come at this from the comic book side of things don't even really think about strip art as something that that might be something they'd ever want to own or is in their wheelhouse or fits with their collection. But it's always cool when I see people kind of branching out into different areas, and strip art's a great one, right? Because there's so much of it out there.
right.
It's pretty accessible, and it's not in many cases. I mean, Alex Raymond stuff is going to be always be a little high, Hal Foster, that sort of thing. But but you can get some decent strip art pages, even Spidey stuff. Maybe not Ramita Senior drawn, but you can get some. You get good strips from the 70s and 80s, and not break the bank, which a published page from that era could. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you go back 20, 30 years, whatever, strip art was really the more expensive art. That was really the stuff that was more in demand and more highly respected. And I guess we'll talk about that a little bit. For me, I think that the issue is what I found myself doing, and I write for the CFA APA. Shout out to anyone that's watching it. But one of the articles was sort of tracking my collection year by year, and what I found was there were some years where I would be buying stuff that was, as you said, shiny and cool and I don't care about it, but shiny and cool and neat. But at the end of the year, something came up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I buy all these? These were small things, but if I added them all up, then I would have been able to buy this much bigger thing. But I kind of blew it off a little bit, right? And that's where the list thing kind of plays in a little bit. If you have the discipline, which I'm again not great at, but what I've tried to, yeah, try to do that.
So have you written any articles for CFA APA that were kind of that talked about your collecting journey?
Yes, yes. Actually, there was a recent issue. The topic, for those that don't know, CFA APA is a 40-year-old now, I think. Fanzine, essentially. It's got a limited group of, say, boy, David Applegate's going to yell at me about this. I believe it's 40 participants, maybe 50, but it's 40 participants, and you have to contribute to each issue. It comes out sort of three times a year, basically, three maybe four. And there's topics for each issue,
Mhm.
although you can go off topic. But one of the topics was if I had $1 million. If I had $1 million, what would I go out and do? What would it look like, right? And I actually thought, hey, um, if I was coming into this right now, what would I do? And then I thought, well, I have my list. How much of that list could I get for $1 million? Could I build, because someone could go and say, well, I'm going to spend $1 million. I'm going to buy this one cover. Okay, great. You got one piece. I mean, and that's maybe all you want, but I think collectors like to collect, right? So I tried to look at heritage for the last year, 18 months, right? And I set myself a rule that I have to pay like one bid more than whatever it went for. Could have gotten more. And I built like a collection with like 17 pieces, somewhere between 15 and 20 pieces from my list, and actually put it together a nice little collection. Not that everyone has $1 million, but it was kind of a fun process to kind of go through and realize that that stuff's out there and it keeps coming up. And, if you have those desires, you can kind of work your way through it.
Well, so you got 16, 17 pieces out of the $1 million. So everything was between the 55 to $65,000 range.
There were
Right.
some
I was thinking it could
ones,
be
but there
eight.
were some much higher ones, right? It's yeah. If you're going to
Right.
say
Oh, no.
arcade page, I have to, when you
Or
start adding
it could be one Black Cat, first appearance on a Spidey cover, and that's it. You're one and done with your $1 million. I mean, it's right. Everybody's going to get different mileage out of that same amount of money, but applying it to what your goals are as a collector, I mean, that's a pretty cool exercise. I kind of, I don't know if I'd have the time to go through and do that, but it would be kind of fun to see where that would wind up. But I bet you'd end up with a collection you were pretty satisfied with at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously I've done mine over a longer period of time, right? So, but it was interesting to try and do it like in a flash. I think some people, there's been some new collectors recently that have come in with a lot of money and sort of bought some big pieces right away, which I think is, all more power to them. But that's not how that's not the collection I was looking for.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, new money brings, new challenges and things to the hobby, I think, all the time, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you have some people who really want to overpay for certain things, I mean, it makes us all end up having to overpay or realize you can't, you're out of that market entirely after a certain point.
Yeah, look, I think what makes the hobby great, I think CAF is really helpful. Everyone can collect what they want to collect, right? Some people just want Batman on a rooftop, gargoyle, right? Some people just want still Golden Age. I mean, there's all sorts of collectors. I do think there are some collectors that their hobby is buying low, selling high, or buying high and selling higher. And I don't know that it matters what they're selling, right? And that's their hobby. That's all. It's just not.
There's a thrill in buying, right? I mean, I think there's always going to be a thrill in buying a new piece of art.
It's just not what I'm in. That's not the same hobby I'm in. That's all.
Right, right. No, I know. I mean, you hear stories all the time. You buy something from Comic Link, and 2 months later, you're trying to sell it on Heritage or Comic Connect or whatever. I mean, there's a thrill in owning something, and that thrill can not last forever. I mean, and that's where that disciplined approach that you're talking about at some parts of your collecting career come into play and give you, I don't know, probably give you a better sense of attachment to the pieces you do buy than not.
Yeah, look, I think I'm still learning about the hobby, but I think the people that go into it and try and learn a little bit more about it and start noticing the differences with different inkers and twice up and all the things that make the hobby really interesting, I think in the long run get more satisfaction out of it versus someone that's, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to sell it for that. That's my it doesn't really matter if the story matters or it's a key or whatever the hell it's called. That's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do.
Yeah, no, I know, and that's kind of the beauty of it too. I mean, art's subjective in terms of what people like or dislike, and so I think that our market can have many different approaches to it, and all be valid. It's it's just everybody's going to have their own view on things, I think, but I think that back to CFA APA, I mean, I was a member for 3 years, and I think that what you guys have done over there, has been pretty remarkable. It's unfortunate that not enough people have had the opportunity to read a lot of the things that have been written there. There's a lot of knowledge over the years that have gone to those publications, and only a select few get to see them. But which isn't usually the goal of a fanzine, right? To keep it to the base small. So it's a unique approach, but I've gotten to pick up a few volumes, after I was part of that, and they're always just fun reads. I mean, like, Jeff Singh is always very concise on whatever topic he chooses to tackle, and and again, it's back to that sharing side of things, like people sharing art on CAF. CFA APA is all about sharing your love and knowledge of the entire spectrum of creating comic books and narrative art. And it's just a wonderful thing that that there are still people willing to put pen to paper, and and put and time to write these articles down, like, because like you said, it's a commitment 3 times a year. And a lot of people take it pretty seriously. They don't write just a 3-page insert. They
Right.
might write a 20-page piece with a lot of photographs and and documentation to go along with it. And so I've always admired what's gone over there. I just wish it was more available in some cases to more people, because I do think that there's a lot of great knowledge in there, and passion too. And it's sort of things that don't get you don't see it too often, except when you're at a show or something, that you realize how immersed some people are, in just the business of comics, and the creation of the creators, and it's just, and it's cool. It's cool knowing that that there are people out there that still love it as much as as much as I do, and continue to this day.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. It's great stuff.
Yeah. Marcus says I flipped everyone. I kept most of my copies. I think I sold a couple back in the day. But the thing is, they're always in demand. Everybody wants one. You put one up on eBay, they're selling for $300 or something. It's kind of hard to pass those up. No, it's not like somebody's going to make a PDF of all those volumes and put them up there somewhere at some point in
Yeah,
time.
there's been a big push not although I think they're getting donated to some university. I'm not really sure where that's going, but I think someone's tracking it someplace. I've been involved maybe for 10 years,
Okay.
but which is sounds like a long time, but for some of the guys, it's been a labor of love forever. So I'm not quite a newbie, but
Well, so let's go to your story then. How did you get your start with original art collecting in general? I mean, do you think was it have comics always been a part of your
so
life?
so I pretty much learned to reading comic books.
Hmm.
There was a barber shop not far from my house, um, King's Cuts, which is gone now. It was owned by two brothers, and they had stacks of comic books, stacks of car magazines, and the Cubs game on every day. And I mean, is at the point where I was probably 8 years old, and my mother would call to the barber shop and say, "Send Ronald home."
That
And
was your
so
library, right?
it really was. I mean, it really was. I loved being there. They had the owner had a '63 red Corvette that was in perfect condition. They were always working on it. So I watched them work on the car. I read comic books. That was the place to be. And I learned how to read comics. I learned how to read from there. In high school, still reading, obviously, mostly at the barbershop, but in high school, I started going to the Chicago Comic Con, this is pre C2E2, pre Wizard World, or any of that kind of stuff. It was just the Chicago Comic Con, and it was at a hotel by O'Hare Airport, and it was there that I first bought original art. I collected comics, but I collected comics, I think, differently than a lot of people do it now. I mean, for me, I was trying to fill the run, right?
Hmm.
I wanted I got all of Marvel 2-in-1s, all of, ROM, all of, I worked my way back on Spider-Man. I mean, I was collecting whole runs. There was no such thing as keys at that point. You were trying to finish the run because collectors like to collect, and certainly condition mattered. It was more of a judgment, but there was no grading. I mean, you were just trying to get the best copy you could and do that. And plus, you're buying new comics as you go along. Sometimes you're buying two, you're reading one, hiding the other one in plastic, the whole thing. So I
Hmm.
was collecting comics. But when I would go to the shows, I would hang out in Artist Alley way more often. And at that time, and Artist Alley was really the artist room. It was kind of a dingy room. And but John Byrne, Terry Austin, Joe Rubenstein, Frank Miller, Marshall Rogers, Joe Staten, and on and on. We're in the room, all just talking to people, and for $20 you get a beautiful sketch, and I did some of that, but then I bought some pages at the time. Now, depending on who you were buying it from, a page could be as much as $90 or something, which was like all the money I had. So
Right.
you had to really be smart about what you were doing. But I would go every year to that, and that's where I started building a small collection at that point. So it was really
I'll talk to a few other collectors who, that show was a very, important one for a lot of people starting, out collecting original comic art. I feel like, Hagenauer talks a lot about that
Yeah.
show, and I forget the other collectors that I've spoken to over the years, but it seems like it was very influential. A lot of artists attended that show, and I think they had an art auction at some point. So it was a show that even if they might have relegated the artists to the dingy corner of the hall, they still had an emphasis on the original art, and I think that's pretty cool that that Chicago show has that legacy, and taken over by Wizard, and then and et cetera after that. I mean, that Wizard show in Chicago was the first show that I bought a piece of art at myself. So I can point to that show. I finished my runs on my books, still had money in my pocket, and I ran into Tom Fleming's table. He was set up with like Philip Anderson, and just they were sharing like a end cap or something like that, and I didn't know them from anybody, but I was like, wow, I have like $200 in my pocket. What can I get? And that's where it all started for me too in Chicago.
Yeah, no, it was a great show, and I met people there. I had some friends there. It was kind of great. It was kind of great. But I was always reading comics. This is just something I've always done. Now, the sad part of the story is coming up. So I had I had a small art collection. I had a fairly large comic collection. I got married to a wonderful woman. Sorry, just in case. So I got married, and after getting married, we were expecting our first child, and my wife had sort of said, "Look, that stuff you're putting on the wall is really scary. I think our kids are going to be, ruined by having that up on the wall. We need to get rid of it." And so I sold my collection. It wasn't a huge collection, but I sold everything I had, and we bought Looney Tunes, limited edition cells.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in fairness, those were up for 20 some odd years. My kids grew up with them. They were great. We got a lot of enjoyment out of those, but it wasn't, in retrospect, a really smart exchange, right?
What kind of stuff did you have that you sold, even though it wasn't a major collection at that point? What were some of the pieces you were letting go of to pick up those
Burn
Looney Tunes
X-Men, Burn FF, Miller Daredevil, Anderson X-Men, Giffen Legion, Chaikin, some pages. I mean, it was a small little,
killing me. Yeah.
small little collection. And
Even
then
the Giffen Legion got me too, because I've always wanted a page from from that run. But wow. So
and then to make it worse, after that, so I decided, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to sell my comic collection. So there was a comic book store I would go to in not far from my house, where I would get my books. And the guy said, "Look, I can't afford to buy this collection, but I'll take it on consignment. As I sell stuff, we'll track it all. I'll just give you money." So, okay, fine. So I gave him the collection, and a week later, I got checked for like $300. It's good. Okay. Next week, I got another $300. This is great. Next week, I got nothing. So another week, nothing. And anyway, then I go to the store, and it's gone. There's a big padlock on the door.
Oh no.
It's gone. The store doesn't exist anymore, including my collection.
Wow.
And so, and at that point, and we had just had our first daughter. At that point, I pretty much stopped comics. It was just too painful for me to do anything. And so, and that was a big chunk of the 90s, actually,
Mhm.
which was not a big, in fact, if you looked at my collection now, I think I have pieces from the 30s till today,
Mhm.
but of the 90s, maybe one, maybe two, because there's no, I don't have the same nostalgia for that stuff because I just wasn't reading as much, if at all, then. And it just hurt. It was traumatic. I'm still scarred.
You're still
I'm still scarred.
you still visit a therapist today
Yeah,
to kind of heal some of those
getting this
wounds.
out. Maybe this helps. But then in the early 2000s, I think I sort of picked up comics again, and then that's when I started buying art again. I I,
Mhm.
I, I started buying art again. So that's my that's my backstory. I'm looking. The comments are popping up, and everyone's like, "Ouch! Ooh! Ow! Ooh, yeah."
Well, that is an awful story. I mean,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have, if you've been in the, in this hobby for as long as some of us, I mean, I think that you have those moments where, whether it's a moment of weakness or whatever, where something like that happens, and you always regret it because I don't know a lot of people who've like coasted from the moment they started collecting, whether it was in beginning in the late '80s or like myself in the late '90s, where everything was smooth and it was perfect. It just doesn't happen. Life gets in the way. Family, families. I mean, Maureen had told me as well. Like we'll never hang an artwork with a skull on the wall kind of a
Yeah.
thing. And I went
Right.
through my phase of buying Sonic the Hedgehog, panel pages, and getting Jim and Mash to draw, some stuff signed to my son, or picked up some animation cells as well. So we picked up, yeah, you kind of go through that phase, right? I mean, I think anybody you're always living throughout the hobby, and you make choices sometimes based on that purchase decisions, right? Or not to purchase things. Kids got to go to college,
Right.
whatever. All these things play
There's always
play
right. Yeah.
roles.
Yeah. But I've tried to bounce back. Tried to bounce
Well, I
back.
mean, and you have. I mean, so you missed the '90s. I missed the '90s by and large as well. So, and it's funny because a lot of the collectors today who are coming into this market space, they're they were really big on the '90s, right? These are collectors who are now in their early 40s, late 30s, and that's the era. That's their sweet spot, and it's fun getting to see it. I just outside of going back and buying a lot of the X-Men stuff, trying to figure out what Age of Apocalypse was about or whatever. I can't
Right.
say that I read many books from the '90s. I don't know if I've ever read anything that Rob Liefeld really had a hand in, for instance. It wasn't there. I bought all the Jim Lee X-Men books, but I didn't read them all. I wanted to have them, but I didn't. I haven't read them. So we're very era specific sometimes, and there are blind spots, I think, for many of us. But it seems like you made up for that downtime in the '90s by getting started in the 2000s collecting again. But so was it a piece of art that got you back into it? Was there a friend in the hobby?
If you want to start going through, I can take. I think I've lined this up to talk about it this way. Maybe.
Okay, yeah, we can go that route. I saw
You know,
somebody say something about don't let go of that Miller Daredevil, so maybe that's that's kind of timely.
that's it. I think that's first, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this page I bought from Frank Miller at the Chicago Comic Con way back when, and he had a stack. He was sitting by himself. It was pretty quiet. He's actually was a very quiet guy. I bought a sketch from him, and I bought this page. And different people have different parts of that run that they like. For me, Bullseye was the piece that I really, that part of the run, that running fight between him and Bullseye. Bullseye went from being a joke as a character to really a wonderful villain, right? And so this page I bought from Frank. I had it in my dorm room all through college, um, as well as the sketch. The sketch I actually had inked and colored by sort of a semi-pro inker, a guy who worked on like the Justice Machine and something like that. And he,
Gustovich or something, maybe.
well, Gustovich was the penciler. It was a guy named Rob Barry, I think.
Oh, Rob. Okay. Yep.
And a really nice guy, but in retrospect, that was not a smart move. Having him ink and color it. But anyway, so I had this page in my dorm room all the way through. This was one of the pieces I sold. And then when I first got back into buying comic art, I sort of had in my head, if there was some of my pages, if I ever saw them again, I would have to get it. And I didn't, it wouldn't matter the price to me, kind of thing, right? Which was a stupid thing to say. but I did find this through CAF, frankly, through connecting somebody on CAF who had the page, and I bought it and got it back. But this was a page I've had, I bought twice. The second time for a pretty big markup over the first time. But,
right, a lot more than you sold it for, too.
A lot more than I sold it for, too. But it was, again, it's from Daredevil 169. It's a great story. It's a story where Bullseye has a tumor. He thinks everybody is Daredevil because Daredevil haunts him, kind of thing.
I remember it well.
Yeah. So it's probably one of my favorite. It probably is my favorite page. This is my favorite page of my whole entire collection. More because I like the story and all that, but really because of the history of, I had this page. It was in my dorm room. It was that important to me, and so this was it for me.
Well, and it made its way back to you too. That's the wonderful part of that. I mean, it's so difficult to, yeah. For me, I had sold a piece of Elementals art, like 15 years ago, and this year I was able to add one of those pieces back, and it meant so much to because I didn't want to sell it, I regretted selling it for those 15, 16 years, and even though it wasn't an expensive page, it still means so much to me to have it back in my collection after having let it go and always regretting that. I get it. It's funny. We were looking. I think I don't remember who I was talking to. We were talking about Miller Daredevil. The prices there. I think we were doing the Heritage recap, and it was just kind of a Daredevil fighting some no-name villain, and it still went for a lot of money. And I remember saying, if that was Bullseye, and this this page went for 75, just imagine what a good Bullseye page would go for, because you can't. I mean, even this day, these things are priceless, and this is a beautiful page. I mean,
and it's Miller at the top of his game. I think actually this is Rubenstein inks at this point, but it's all pencils on ink and on one board. Later on there was a lot of shifting about who was doing what, and it's more things done and everything. But it was just a great time in the run, and just my favorite page. My favorite page, I want to say.
Wow. Now, is this something that you would you're able to frame and have on the wall, or is it in a portfolio? How do you source it?
Now it's in Mylar, sitting in a pile. I've tried to. I've got stuff framed around me, but it got to be a hassle to try and move things around too often, right?
Sure.
So right now this is just in a Mylar, and every once in a while I just go into a room and kind of look through things.
Well, it's spectacular. I mean, there's several memorable pages and series of pages throughout Miller's Daredevil run, but the Bullseye battles were some of the best. And like you said, he was he wasn't really prior to Miller, Bullseye wasn't really that serious a character, but
A stupid
Miller,
character.
right? He was. But yeah,
people, right? So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you go. So I think, yeah, don't let it go.
It will not be going again.
All right, so this one came back, but was this early in your, in coming back to?
It was. I think the next page is, yes. Okay. So this is when I really started getting back into it. So this is Finch, I think by Danny Mickey from New Avengers, right? And so I started reading when the Avengers disassembled stuff. I started really getting into that. I'd never seen Finch's art before because when I would read, I really focus on, Marvel, DC. I hadn't really gone into some of the other titles for the most part, and I thought Finch's art was just fantastic. I actually used to own a lot of it, but this is where I really started getting back into it. So I was reading these stories. I thought this was fantastic. We had this thing called the internet that seemed to help out. I tracked down Spencer Beck, who I think at that point was representing David Finch, as well as like 500 artists. I mean, the man what Spencer did was amazing, frankly. And I know people make fun of his website. It's not the newest website in the world, but for me, he has been just a really helpful, nice guy, super professional, and got stuff done. But so I was able to buy some Finch artwork, and this is what really started me back into it. That you could buy artwork. I was buying a lot of New Avengers pieces. I've got maybe 3 or so left, maybe a couple covers and a splash from issue 1. But I probably had 40 or 50 pages right away. I mean, they were I thought reasonably priced and great art, and I love the story. I love the whole New Avengers vibe, and if anything, this is what really got me back into collecting. Spencer Beck and the New Avengers, and that started what became a very slippery slope for me.
Well, Spencer's site was one of the first. I mean, and you're right, it hasn't changed since then either. But yeah, I mean, I think any collector who was just getting started and using the internet, that after eBay, Spencer's website was a huge resource, and the art was super affordable. I mean, I can think back to lots of stuff I looked at for months on end and never bought, and I just because they were there, and I thought about it, I could have owned every single Ian Churchill like
Right.
Hulk cover or whatever. I mean, that they were just plentiful on his site. He was repping Perez back then. You could there were so many things you could have picked up from him for
you would have these fantastic sort of winter sales, right? But anyway, Spencer's great. I love Spencer.
But it's those things those are great things to even remind myself of, because you forget the things that kind of helped you along early on, and there weren't a lot of dealers that had websites at that time, or reps in Spencer's case. So I mean, Berkey had something that wasn't really of substance. I don't remember what Anthony had, but I mean, Albert had some kind of presence, but a lot of those sites didn't have a lot of scans or images on them, and Spencer's wasn't easy to get around either, but at least they were there. And so other than those few sites and eBay, I mean, that was all we had.
So Finch and New Avengers, or Avengers Disassembled, that was really my foot back into the stuff. That's when I really started buying what I was reading at that time, and that's shortly after that's when I found CAF, and that's when I found that Miller Daredevil page again. That's what brought that back. But I found CAF and found there were other people maybe as crazy as me to do this, and so I started posting stuff and started connecting with people. And but this was the gateway. It was David Finch and Avengers and New Avengers. That's what really got me back into it.
That's cool. I mean, Finch's art was kind of a revelation at the time. I mean, it was hard not to fall in love with it, because it was very distinctive and and different than the art that I was looking at buying, because I was a big Byrne Cockrum fan, and and then all of a sudden you see Finch, it just kind of changed. I never bought anything by him, but I looked at everything he worked on, because his style was just so neat. It was like seeing Chris Pachalo's work, early on. It stood out as just being, a different artistic approach to a medium that maybe I kind of maybe had underappreciated some things about it. But yeah, no, Finch is a good gateway for a lot of people. I'm sure that he brought a lot of collectors into it, and he always had a long line at San Diego, just to get sketches and stuff.
Yeah, no, right. I bought some stuff. Eventually moved away from um, Spencer. I ran into him at some shows. I bought some stuff from him then. Um, Again, really nice guy, um, it was a style that, as you said, just grabbed you when you saw it. It was like, wow, this is really amazing stuff. Really amazing stuff.
So Marcus wants to know, did you keep the Looney Tunes cells?
Marcus, we have those. Yeah, we still have them. We still have them. And now we just had our first granddaughter, so now I'm kind of angling over to see if I can get something on their wall. We'll see what my daughter says. But yeah, we hold on to those.
Yeah, there's a lot of good kids art out there. I bought like Powerpuff Girls covers and things like that, and My Little Pony is always going to be popular, right? And there's plenty of artists out there, that are definitely worth supporting, that are, that have worked, on those titles. So you can buy published stuff. It doesn't have to just be an animation cell or,
Yeah. Yeah.
yep. And Comic Art Boston is congratulating you on being a new grandpa.
Thank you. That's my big win this year, so that's good. All right, from here. Okay, so I'm buying all this stuff that I'm reading, right? It's all, I read it and then it pops up on Spencer's site or some other place, and I'm reading and buying and reading and buying as you go. I go to a Chicago con, and it may have been Wizard World at that point in time. By that point in time, and Berkey is there, and he has this cover on his wall, and this was like a lightning strike for me. That, wait a second, you mean you can actually own a cover of the Silver Surfer? That's actually something that exists. You can actually get that. That was just shocking to me. I mean, I was buying stuff that was coming out, but I don't know why I had in my head that all the old stuff was locked away or never be seen, or who knows where it was. But Mike had this, and I remember, he's probably laughing right now, but I remember I traded him, I think 50 other pages plus I wrote a decent sized check to get this cover off of his wall. But this was now the gateway of, what's the line? It wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the end of the beginning, right? This is the line. This is where all of a sudden I said, wait a second. If this is out there, there must be other things out there that I would want or like, that I had read all those years ago growing up. Maybe, with the check, that's funny. That I could actually get. And so this sort of led to the whole kind of creation of the list at some point of what kind of things I wanted that had been meaningful to me, and could I get things like that. So this was sort of my first, I suppose this is the end of the Silver Age, kind of sort of. But this was where I first started thinking, wow, I could actually start going back. It wasn't just stuff I was reading. I could actually now go further back and see what's out there. And so that's what this was. The Silver Surfer for me was just a great run. There were some different inkers throughout the series, so the art, some of it's amazing, some of it's a little uneven, but the stories were phenomenal. The Surfer as a character I thought was phenomenal. But seeing that this cover actually existed was just huge for me. This was my first big, I'm going back now. Okay, now we're getting serious about looking back in time and seeing what we could really find.
Right. I think, when I started buying, and Spencer was one of those sites that came across early too. I was more of, buying artwork from the books that were on the shelves in the last, 2 to 3 months. And I don't really remember what my first, more like a Silver Age page would have been. But yeah, once you take that leap to move away from the modern stuff that you're reading, and then diving into this side of things, it changes your whole perspective. And I like Comic Art Boston saying Mike can drive a hard bargain. I mean, I've picked up things from Mike. And yes, you know, Mike tends to come out on top of whatever deal that's out there. But the thing is, he usually has great stuff like this, and so
Yeah.
sometimes you have to give a little to get a little.
Yeah. I mean, Mike, I think still trades because I think he just enjoys the whole process more than
Oh
anything.
yeah.
But back then, Mike would trade a ton. I mean, that was a
Mhm.
big thing for him. And yeah, there's no doubt he came out way ahead on this. But maybe not in the long run. This was something I just love the layout. I love the cover. I love the fact that there's only whatever 16, 17 of these covers, and the fact that I own one was just, I mean, crazy to me. It was crazy that I could actually own something like that.
Well, I mean, I think we all go through that same feeling, right? Whether it's a vintage page like this, or even, or you know, or something that's coming out that's more current. Uh, the moment you realize you can own something that was part of a story that you loved. I mean, because so for this is sort of. I mean, was Silver Surfer one of your favorite characters? I mean, you know, would this be more of a
You
nostalgic?
know, I didn't. It's funny. The comic, the barbershop had both Marvel and DC. So I grew up reading kind of everything. Some people, I would never read DC or whatever. I read everything I could that they had. I'm sure Richie Rich too, but that just didn't have the same, allure to me. But but the Surfer was just a great character, and these stories uh, were terrific. And again, for a little kid, you're reading some big words. You're really learning some big concepts. It was just a great character. Just a great character.
Well, yeah. I mean, but you're right. Those are the moments that you always remember as a collector. So that's cool. I mean, because this is you really going out on a limb. You know, you don't give up 50 pages and write a check for something that doesn't have that kind of an impact on you. I mean, I think I've never been able to take that kind of a plunge as a collector, but I feel like the fact that you did. I mean, this is kind of the point where everything kind of changes when you realize you can, like you said, it's what led you to the strips, some of which we're going to look at.
Yeah,
Uh,
it got worse. It got worse as time went on. but yeah, this is how it started. I think this is how it started. When I started looking back.
well,
Um,
so it's Chicago again, and
was
Berkey. So where do we go from here? Okay, so we have a Watchmen page, very very memorable moment in that book.
Yes. So Watchmen was just, and again, I read Watchmen when it came out on the stands, right? So, but
Hmm.
Watchmen is just one of those stories you could read over and over and over again and see something different every time you read it. And pages, filtered out, I think, really in the UK, and then they eventually sort of made it over here a little bit. But this just being the world, I saw this page was kind of like, well, that's what I need. That's the page I want. Now, I've got a few other pages and a cover, I think, but
Yes, I
but
did see the cover in your gallery today when I was going through and brushing up on your collection.
well, that the cover. One guy actually owned really all the covers, and Heritage auctioned them all at the same time. One. And so I jumped on one. But the truth of the matter is the covers are sort of meaningful frames, but the story is really it's an education on sequential storytelling, essentially, right? There's not a wasted line in any of these. If you've ever seen some of the scripts that Moore provided to Gibbons, it's craziness how detailed they are, right? And everything means something, and how they were laid out, and how they flow. And there's just not a wasted line. There's not a wasted word. It's just an amazing story. And this scene at the bottom with him and the cat, um, you know, just me and the world. That was, to me, just it's telling the story. It's just everything about it was was great. And yeah, right. I mean, I just think it's just such a great story. So, on that list was find something from Watchmen. And I had a couple other Watchmen pages that I had traded away or sold at some point. But then I grabbed this one, and then I grabbed a few others as time went on. But this was the one where I just thought that's, and it's weird. You can see how the way it's drawn. There's a huge margin on one side, but not so much on another. I'm not really sure why it got laid out that way, but and if you look at a lot of pieces that have been up for auction, they're not centered. It's kind of a weird shape, but just a great page, just a great page from a great story. And
Yeah,
it's funny. I think Watchmen's. So again, I told you I don't really collect comics, but a lot of people say, well, if it's a comic key, then the art's going to be expensive or whatever, and that's probably true. But a lot of people have written, and I think they're right. It doesn't really work the other way, right? I mean, I don't know that Watchmen comics are necessarily keys or highly valued or whatever it is, but the art is, because it's just a great story, and that's what drives it. And so again, in this case, there wasn't really, it's Gibbons inking Gibbons, but it's a collaborative piece, right? I mean, it's the story. Gibbons has done a lot of other stuff that is good, I guess. Some of it's great, but it's not the same as Watchmen, right? He's going to be forever tied to Watchmen.
Oh yeah, and there's definitely an Alan Moore tax, on artwork from his books. Doesn't matter. I mean, they're all very memorable, but I mean, I had Hillary Barta on for an art sale, and it was amazing, seeing Splash Brannigan stuff going for two or three times what like other stuff he had worked on during the same period because Alan Moore wrote those stories. And I mean, I don't own anything by Alan Moore. At the end of the day, there will always be that, and that's what's special about it. I mean, Gibbons, I love Gibbons artwork. And and I know I'll never own a Watchmen page. Always been trying to find a 2000 AD page that suits me, right? Just trying to find that right Dan Dare or something like that. I'd be happy with something because he's somebody who I've never owned a published piece by, but it's something everybody should know. I mean, maybe you can't own a Watchmen page, but you want something like Gibbons. There's lots of Gibbons work that's affordable out there. Like, you can get this Green
He's a
Lantern
fabulous artist.
for really, for a fair price. But absolutely, owning anything from this, I don't care that it wasn't drawn centered on the page, right? At the end of the day, this is.
I just find it interesting, right? Just why did it happen like that? How did it end up like that? But again, I think it's that collaborative thing, right? It's the words, it's the layout, it's the the art. It's what makes Doctor Who, Brian Peck.
Okay, Brian Peck. That's true. Before I sold most of my collection at one point, I owned like 3 Doctor Who pages by Gibbons, and they were beautiful, and they were oversized, which was really cool too. But so that's something I could try to. Brian, if you would just pass on the next couple of Gibbons Doctor Who pages that come up, I'd appreciate it. Because I think I've bid against him on a couple over the years and not been able to get one back.
Brian's got a great collection.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, congrats. It's a wonderful example. It's beautiful.
All right, and then Burn Austin X-Men. So, back in the day, I guess in college, high school, college, probably, the 4 titles that I probably spent the most time on were X-Men, Daredevil, New Teen Titans,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I'm forgetting something else, but I'm trying to was.
Well, Legion was with Giffen was coming out around that time.
Right,
If you're,
right. Yeah, right. At that point, Giffen and Malstadt were doing Legion. Paul Levitz, I think, was writing. It was all great stuff. So this actually, I actually got this in a trade with Albert. I had a ton of actually John Romita Jr. Covers, and a Finch Captain America cover, actually. And I thought I bought those at a really good price. But Albert, who has ESP, knew exactly how much I paid for it somehow. And at the time he had 3 Burn Austin splashes on his wall, and basically I sort of gave him this stack, and I had my pick of the 3 splashes. And for me, this is the one. Now this is very early in the Burns run, right? We just gotten off of Cockrum, and now Burn takes over, and he's still sort of, he hasn't really evolved his style as much as you'll see in the later issues, but it had the whole team on it, and the other one was there were 2 end page splashes. One was Storm, who had been defeated, and one was actually I can't remember the issue now, but Cyclops is sort of hooded and on the floor, with Mastermind standing over, or Jason Wingard, or whatever it was called at that point, right, standing over. But this was the one that
Everybody wants, from Burns' run, if you want that team splash, you don't care if they're in the jet, in the mansion, wherever, you have a winner of a page if you have a decent sized panel that has, the whole team in it, and you have the title page. so yeah, I mean, this is like the cream of the crop. And I actually, for whatever weird reason, prefer the earlier run with Byrne, even though we're really just kind of figuring it out, and things were, the inking was a little heavier maybe, and but I don't know, if there's something to me that's nostalgic about those first like 10 issues that he worked on versus the later run. I think if I were to go back and try to get a page, I'd probably go back and try to get something from those first 6 issues if I could.
Yeah, listen, I think one of Burns' incredibly creative and wonderful artist and writer in cases, but he did a lot of the little stuff that you would notice more when he did. So he was very careful about the heights of everybody, the relative sizes. You'd see other stories, and how short it really is Wolverine versus Cyclops compared to Colossus, that kind of stuff. He just carried a lot of the little things differently. But here, Storm and Nightcrawler are taking the lead, even though later on Wolverine was kind of his guy. But yeah, this sort of scratched the itch, I guess, if that's the right way to say that.
Well, I think it's there's a T-shirt out there that says Albert knows. So there's no way, Albert knows a lot. He's been around long enough, and has seen a lot of transactions over time. So there's probably not too many pieces he doesn't know.
I'm sure he did very, very well in our deal, because Albert always wins. Actually, is the way I look at it. But I'm happy with how it came out. He has asked me to retrade him from time to time. So, but I don't think this is going anywhere. I think this is going to be sticking around for a while.
No. Do you have other Burn X-Men? Because I don't remember. I don't think I saw.
Not in the CAF. I have another piece or two, but
okay.
But this is the one that.
So you weren't one and done with this either. I was trying to get to that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard for me to be one and done. I just don't have the control. I don't think to be one and done.
All right.
Although I don't have any more. I don't have any more pages from this run. So this is actually Byrne Rubenstein. This is from the Roger Stern writing Captain America run. It was a way too short run. They only went like 6 or 7 issues, right? And but each one was the best. And this is Baron Blood. Alberto's gonna be driving to my house right now.
He's sobbing right now.
It was funny. I didn't know much about. I mean, I really kind of not read much of the Invaders, right? And going back time. But that sort of led me into looking a little bit further back about Bear and Blood and where it came and all that kind of stuff. But I thought that Byrne's Cap was, to me, the best, right? I mean, some people love Zach. I mean, everyone's got their Sal Buscema. Everyone's got their sort of favorites of everybody. For me, Cap's Byrne was solid but athletic. He moved a lot, moved quickly. It was just really well done. And this thing is just neat the way he handled the light sources, and I think he actually used a razor to sketch some of the parts of it. It's just a spectacular example, I think, of this run. Just love this run.
I'm with you, and I'm sure a lot of other Cap fans, that the run was too short.
Yeah.
But they were memorable. It was back, that time. Anything that Byrne worked on, I bought. Because I wanted to draw like John Byrne. I want, there was nothing he could do that I knew I wasn't going to enjoy.
Well, listen, just a fabulous artist. But I think he did all the little things right, and because he gave it a lot of thought when he was doing this stuff. But I later on, as I got more into the strip art, Milton Caniff, things like that, you start appreciating more the use of darks and the light sources and how he did it. But Byrne was top notch. Byrne was top notch.
Well, you didn't have to give up 20 or 50 pages to get this one. I would hope.
No, this was just money. Just money. This was just money.
Oh boy, look at this.
Dark Knight Returns. So this is actually the end of the fight with the mutant, the second fight with the mutant leader, where he defeats the mutant leader. Dark Knight Returns, again, like Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns is every year there's another Batman thing that comes out and says, oh, this is this generation's Dark Knight Returns. But the next year there's another one that's this generation's Dark Knight Returns. Dark Knight Returns is just Dark Knight Returns. It's just, it caught everybody by surprise. The style was different than Miller had ever used. And the story, I bought it when it came out on the newsstands, right? And the story was just nothing you ever thought about. You didn't have to announce it was Elseworlds or, the story just sort of hit you. And everything about the story is great. But to me, this I've got a few Dark Knight Returns pages, but this fight with the mutant leader to me was, where he took over, where after he got his behind kicked initially and saved by Ellie Robin. This is where he came back, and it's just a great story. And so I've been, for a while, it was difficult to find any of these pages, and then one showed up, and then another showed up, and then they started dribbling out here and there. One collector had, I don't know, 100 pages out of I mean, a lot of those, and over time let some go, right? But this page for me was just, I thought it was a great page. It was a great page. And again, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see in the background the people, I'm sorry, go up to the crowd. The faces in the crowd, kind of, the mutant guys all looking at this saying, what the heck? How did that, wait a second, right? and that small touch, I thought, was just, as they're all standing, knee deep in mud, that small touch, I think, really makes the page. The way Miller laid it out, it's just so dramatic that he's got that center point, and then everyone's that, and then right below it, you've got all of a sudden now a guy with a bat on his face saying, the mutants are dead, Batman's the guy, that kind of thing. It's just a great story, and this page really was something I really liked.
Well, it's beautiful. I mean, there's, like you said, there weren't a lot of these pieces out there for a while, and then there were. But I mean, this is gorgeous. I mean, it's an example, as brutal as it is. it's just a wonderful page. And and the book was kind of a revelation, right? The format was different. I mean, there was I picked it up and I wasn't a DC guy at all, but and I liked Miller a lot, but I didn't think Miller could make me buy a DC book, but he did at the end of the day, because
But he
I
did,
kept.
right? I mean, he
Yeah.
really. I mean, he was in a stretch, right, where he could really do no wrong. I mean, everything he was doing was just great. Um, you know, even Ronin, I think I really like the story. It hasn't held up the same way necessarily,
Hmm.
but it's hard to say this hasn't held up. I mean, this just is. I mean, it's just a great story. Still sells graphic novels of this story.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I like Ronin still. I go back. I love the art. I mean,
Yeah.
the story
Like
was always a little dense, but the art was beautiful.
the art was neat. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I'm
Well,
a
okay, now
ghostwriter.
now we're in a Killing Joke. Um, so again, this is just those one. This is a one and done, I suppose. It's a one shot story, right?
Hmm.
It's Brian Boland. Now, I did not have. I was not a Judge Dredd guy. I just didn't read that. Boland wasn't necessarily my guy. Um, Camelot 3000, I like that. I mean, right? Killing Joke again was, and now you've got again Alan Moore, right? So again, it was just that kind of combination of an amazing story with crazy artwork that was just different than I had seen before, and um, I must have read this story a jillion times. Um, and so when a page came up, and they don't come up that often, I was able to dig deep and grab it. I remember I was at a Comic Con not a couple, maybe 5 6 years later, and someone was selling another page, and uh, I was talking to someone who was thinking about buying it, and I just said, "Look, there's whatever it is. There's 38 pages. It's the story everyone's going to always remember. Everyone seems to always remember it. This is your chance. What else? If you can tell me like three other things you're going to get with that money, let's talk about it. But
Right.
this was the best of the best. Um, there are some great story pages in this. There are some okay story pages in this one. I think this is a solid page. The page with the Joker. There's pages. I mean, but to me, again, it's just the storytelling is so strong. The use of light and dark is so strong. It's just yeah, right. I agree that Marvel fan. The
Yeah.
Joker is great. It's just a great story. So I was thrilled to be able to get one of these pages. Yeah, this is definitely a one and done kind of thing.
Well, like you said, they're so scarce. The collectors that have them, they know they're irreplaceable.
Right.
You're not like were telling the other collector. I mean, what else are you going to buy with that money? If you really want it, this is your chance, because it's not going to. It's probably not going to come again.
And
Um,
again, so for me, this is on that list, right? I'm looking at those lists. Boy, Killing Joke. I'd like to get a page from Killing Joke. Okay, cross that one off. I can do that, right? That just like the Byrne Rubenstein Captain America run, that was on the list. When these things pop up, if you can do it, you jump. I mean that's what you're doing.
mhm. So this was like a direct from a dealer
This
or
was actually
collector.
I bought this in Heritage. I actually got this in Heritage
Oh, you
auction.
got it. I assumed it wasn't an auction. So okay, wow.
No, this was
So
Heritage auction.
you had to get that. You had to throw it down a little bit there to
Oh
make
yeah,
sure
no,
it
no,
was yours.
it was hardcore. I mean, I've actually I haven't pointed out all the Heritage stuff, but some of the stuff coming up, I think definitely Heritage auction. But this was a Heritage auction page, and I was lucky or whatever, but or more determined to get it than anybody else. Maybe that's the best way to describe it.
Well, I mean, the last panel is just phenomenal. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
there might be a better page or two in the book, obviously, but yeah, you got a really good one.
yeah. No, I'm pretty happy with it overall. Okay, so the same way that Byrne Rubenstein Captain America was my Captain America, Marshall Rogers Terry Austin is my Batman. This detective run, Steve Englehart writing it. Um, this was, I just thought this was the best run in the world, and it's hard to, this is actually an interesting cover. I should have sent you a scan of the actual cover. The Penguins outline is there on the wall. If you look at the actual cover, it's easier to see the way they've sort of colored it. But
Oh, I see right here. Yeah.
yeah, but again, the way Marshall Rogers drew Batman with the cape and the huge ears and the cape that's like 50 feet long. Robin even looked tough wearing shorts. I mean, he just did everything. That whole run I just thought was fantastic. And so on this one, actually, this was offered to me privately, and I thought that price is too high. I just can't do it. Couldn't do it. And then I bought it like 2-3 years later on Heritage for basically the same amount of money I would have paid. But it was a good lesson for me because you start to realize when you pass things up that are on your list, they don't come up necessarily all that often, right? And so Marshall was taken way too early. Lee, that was horrible. Really. I mean, I met him a couple times at the cons. Just a nice guy. Just a nice guy. But he was, his buildings were sort of architecturally perfect. The lines were neat. Terry Austin was a really good inker for him. He had started with Englehart. They started another series right before he passed away, and I had some pages out of that. But this first run was just like lightning in a bottle to me. I mean, I just loved everything about it. Hugo Strange, right? I think was one of the big baddies there, and it was just he did. Oh, Marcus says he studied architecture. That makes sense. I may have read that at one point, but everything about it was great. Just how he did it, the story Englehart told, and that drives the nostalgia for me, and that's what got it onto the list, right? That's what did it.
Well, it's kind of fun that you were offered it and you bought it for almost the same that it was offered. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of collectors who have pieces, we tend to overvalue our stuff a little bit, but you buy a year or two, and in that case, that's about right. I mean, a couple years later, you got it for the same amount that it was being offered, but it's back to good art will always be valuable. I mean, from runs that are memorable and that have
Yeah, I mean, again, once in a while you get lucky. You get another bite at the apple, right? It doesn't always happen.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't always happen. Okay, so
Kirby.
this this is a splash from Tales to Astonish. This is where it all goes bad for me. so I've now got things from my list, and now I start working my way backward and seeing more things from the Silver Age, right? And this page is twice up. Now I don't know. All right, I'm sure everyone knows, but I'm going to say it anyway. So comics are printed back in the day. Comics were probably a little slightly different now, but they were printed 6x9, right? And so when they drew them, they had to keep that same ratio, the 1 to 1.5 ratio, and so they doubled it. So comics were drawn at sort of a 12 by 18, size, and that is how comics were drawn from within a range from when they first started, essentially, all the way through the late 60s. And so when you hear people talk about large art or twice up art, that's these bigger pieces. They're drawn at this sort of 12 by 18 scale. In the late 60s, Murphy Anderson, who was a penciler and inker in DC, started a push to actually use smaller boards. I think to save himself some time, actually, he started doing it. But what they realized was that if they did the arts instead of a 12 by 18, 10 by 15, which is the same ratio, the 1 to 1.5, they did it by 10 by 15. The guys that produced the comics actually needed less film to do it. It actually took them less time to do it, and it saved them money. So that sort of became the DC started it, and it pushed it through to Marvel. That became the standard, right? The art sort of got smaller. Some artists thought that was great. Neil Adams liked it small. Kirby hated it. Kirby liked the bigger scale. But I saw twice up art, and that's when I realized that that's where I need to be heading. And so again, I said, okay, I need to curate my collection a little bit more, and I had a goal of let me try and reduce the number of pages in my collection, but raise the average value. So again, I'm going to sell on eBay or whatever it was, 40 or 50 to get one, right? But I don't know that when people see these scans, I don't know that they appreciate. Okay, so we'll see if we can do this. I'm going to try and, if you can appreciate, I'm going to try and stand back and they'll make this bigger or not. The difference between, all right, so I'm going to stand back here. So this is a nice splash, but this is the twice up art. It's dramatically bigger, right? It's not a little bit bigger. It's a lot bigger. And so when you see the twice up splashes or twice up pages, and you realize how much bigger they are, it's impressive. And when you're starting to look back at things you want to see, and you see this thing that's huge compared to a normal one, it's significant. That's why I think when people are pricing art, twice up art tend to have, in some cases, a premium for those that understand it. But if you're only looking at stuff online, I don't think you realize how much of a difference it is until you actually see it in person, right? And so seeing this kind of splash in person to me was a revelation. And then I said, okay, well, wait a second. I've got this stuff on my list, but now I need to know where these things came from. I've got to start going further back in time. So yeah, I have some Sal Buscema Hulk, because Sal's my Hulk guy. That's my Hulk I liked. But who was doing the Hulk before that? And this is actually a Romita page when Romita was just getting going. Curry did the layouts. But it's really mostly a Romita page. But again, seeing this twice up scale was just something special for me. And this started me now really focusing on the Silver Age, right? From really the beginnings of Marvel through the late 60s, right? All the stuff was twice up, and started looking at some of the original artists. So this was an early Romita page. And I do remember selling like 50 things to buy this one page. Not as bad as the next one we're going to see, but the same thing. Okay, so this I actually I saw this at San Diego. It was on a sort of pseudo dealer's wall. It was a ton of money. And I having dealt with Mike Berkey, I thought, well, let me go in to see if he'll trade 75 pieces and some money for this.
And a nice check.
And he had no interest whatsoever. And then maybe 6 months later, this shows up on Heritage. And Ditko, I had a Ditko Spider-Man page. I've got a couple others now, but a splash page was something special. That splash page we just looked at from Tales of Astonish, or this splash page. This is the story. This is where the artist said, "I'm going to make you turn the page and get into this thing." Right. This is what you're gonna. This is what I'm laying it out. This is how it's going to go. And Ditko had a unique way of doing it. If you look at a lot of the earlier Spider-Man splashes, it's at Spider-Man's a small character, or it's his back to you, that kind of thing, because they're showing the villains. They've got to get you spotlighted on the villains. This one had, putting aside the loose animals from the zoo, you got Doc Ock, you got the supporting cast, you got J. Jonah typing away, and to me this was just, again, if there's a one and done, this was my chance to do it. Exactly right. Jonah kept up the picture because this is the guy I hate so much, right? That's totally true. And so, but I had a client meeting the day of the auction, and so I figured I'm never going to get this. Plus, I didn't know if I had enough money. I sold everything and scraped together and done whatever I could do to get ready for it. And I finished the meeting and I go running to my car and I pull out my computer and I had they used to call them a MiFi, like a portable, Wi-Fi.
Oh yeah, I used to use those back in the day.
I'm in a parking lot. I'm calling this up, right? And I get there in time for the lot right before this one. So I'm in the parking lot. This comes up. I'm bidding, and I finally just say, one more bid. That's it. And I'm done. One more bid, and the bid held. And I got it. Now, my friends, when I got this, they were for the most part saying they didn't. I have a great group of friends that I've gotten through this hobby. It was a cut bid, actually. I think it was Marcus. I think it was a cut bid. And they would never say anything mean. But I think they were all sort of saying you kind of overpaid. And
was it more than it was offered at San Diego though?
It was basically the same, which was actually in his case less, right? Because I'm sure he wasn't going to pay a seller's premium. Maybe he's getting a little bit of the buyer's premium at that point, but still it was less than he was going to get. But I think my friends had sort of thought, nice, it's great, good for you. You're never going to get your money out of it, and if you die with it, you die with it, and that's fine. But kind of overpaid for it. But again, for me, it was this twice up Ditko splash, of which there are only 30 some out of those. Yeah. And Comic Art Boston's right. I think if we're honest about it, I've overpaid for everything I like, right? At some point, it's how it works. But to get a Ditko splash was just, again, this was on the list of things of, I can't believe I'll ever own one of these, let alone when I got a Ditko page, that was amazing. But to get a Ditko splash was craziness. And I was just, thrilled with it. I mean, that was this to me was the top of the top. As I'm going into the Silver Age and diving further back in, this is from issue 12. You're talking the first 12 issues of where they're creating the character. I mean, it was just everything about it was just great. Everything about it was just great.
You have a few other Ditko Spideys though now.
I do. I have two other. I actually have two consecutive from this issue. Actually, from issue 12, I have two other consecutive pages. Those are actually two consecutive pages of Spidey fighting Doc Ock in a burning building, and the use of the light sources is just phenomenal.
You're on your way to completing the book, Ron. You have 3 pages from this one.
I started cheating on that one. I bought it from another collector who actually put the 2 pages together. So I kind of cheated on that one. He did all the hard work, but
All's
yeah,
fair in collecting comic art and war. No, I mean, hey, let somebody else do the work. I mean, that there's nothing wrong with that. But the fact that they did all that work and were willing to let them go, it's
yeah. Look again. I've gotten some great friends here, and you know, if they want to, if they're getting rid of things, we let each other know, and save ourselves a little money, and maybe make sure it's going to a good home, kind of thing. So,
hmm
but and actually, if you look at the top, see it's the 6 1/4 by 9 1/4 kind of thing. That's where
yeah.
the page was going to be when it was printed. So the measurements are probably about 12 1/2 by 18 1/2 is the art drawn. That's the twice up of the printing. That's where twice up came from.
I only have a couple twice up pages, but they are, it's
I
just
yeah
something different. They just have a different presence than an 11 by 17.
yeah I've kind of focused on twice up stuff. Alberto, shield your eyes. I think for this next. Um,
Oh boy, hope you're sitting
uh,
down, Alberto.
so this actually was a heritage buy also. Um, at the time, Captain America, um, Captain America really appears in Avengers 4, right? Um, so as I'm working my way back, right, Kirby is kind of the guy to track down. Kirby was an extremely prolific, amazing artist, but different inkers made things look differently. This is actually Chick Stone. Stone's line, I think, works with Kirby phenomenally well. More of these stories were actually inked by Frank Giacoya, I think, than most. But Stone on Kirby is just amazing. And this is issue 60. 59 was really his first big issue in Tales of Suspense. Tales of Suspense, Cap starts really in 59. It goes up through 99, and then issue 100, it just becomes Captain America. Iron Man was in there, so it was these are sort of two stories. It was Cap and prefer Chicks on Warrior. Again, so Kirby had a long career. At this stage, this is very early in the Marvel creation of the Marvel universe, right? And he is working hot and heavy, doing a crazy volume of art at any given time. I mean, I actually did some research at one point in November, like November of '63. I think I actually looked this up for another article. He drew 139 pages and 7 covers. So,
Unbelievable.
so whoever was around to ink stuff is going to be, is inking stuff, right? And this is very early in his return, Captain America's return to the world, right? 59 has since come out, but at the time 60 was kind of the first thing you could see of him coming back to Tales of Suspense, and you know, as people go into why I want Kirby, as you look further back, there's Kirby Tales of Suspense, which are the twice up, the older pieces. Then he goes to DC, then he comes back, and now you've got later on in like the 200s, he comes back to Marvel. Different inkers, different style a little bit. So there's different values, obviously, but you're taking into account the Kirby's skills at that time, who's inking it, the size of the page, all that stuff. But the amount of work he is he is Albert, I just didn't show it. Maybe I didn't. I'm not gonna say it. So, but what you're seeing is somebody who's at the top of their game at this point. And I'm a Cap fan, not as big as Alberto's, but I'm a Cap fan. Um, and so when I saw this, I had to grab this one.
A Heritage buy?
I think this was Heritage also, actually, as I'm thinking about it. I think this was Heritage also. Yeah.
Well, I'm a Thor guy, so you had to throw one of these in here. Yeah, the thing for me is so many title pages from Journey to Mystery or the early Thors were just fantastic.
Yeah.
They
So,
were.
for me, the splash pages are, and again, you can see the top 6.25 by 9.25. The splash pages for me are just so meaningful. Plus, you don't have the same sort of argument like who penciled it, who inked it. Their names are right there. But they are just so dramatic. They're just drawing you into the story, right? And again, this is Stone. I've got another Journey to Mystery, I think, with Giacoya doing it inks, which I love. But Stone's line is just so powerful and strong that it just worked so well with this point. Later on, Kirby's work was a little bit different, and the inkers were doing maybe some cases more work. Most of Journey to Mystery, a lot of the Thor stuff was inked by Coletta. Coletta actually was not a bad inker. He was actually pretty good. He was just really fast, and they wanted him to be really fast. At some point, he got to a point where he was just cranking it out so fast, he was erasing some of Kirby's pencils just because he needed to get the thing done. And so some of the stuff is just not as strong. And so I think, when you get into that, this is the kind of hobby, when you get into it, you start noticing difference. Some of the Coletta stuff is phenomenal, actually, I think. Some of it's not so good. I mean, and I think that's just
My only Kirby is a Coletta inked page, and it's okay. But I agree with you.
Yeah, I think
Earlier
Coletta
stuff-
gets a bad rap. I actually think, but he was, I think, a very strong inker. I think he was just a very fast inker at times, and they needed,
it was page rate, man. He wanted to do 2 books a month. He knew how much he had rent to pay. But I get it. If I could trade up, I would get a Chick Stone inked, Kirby Thor page without question. I mean, it's the period, the era. I mean, the inking, the lines are so strong. And I
right.
mean, looking at this, I haven't seen a bad title page from this era with Kirby, Stone.
No, they're
I know
all
that
great stuff. And
they're
I think
all
people
amazing.
mentioned Sinnott was really strong on Kirby. He did a lot of the FF, although he sort of did 5. I think I got a splash from 5, but then they had a bunch of different inkers before he started it, and then he took over after that point, and he kind of sort of set everyone else had to look like that from when you went on for Sinnott. But Sinnott did some Kirby Tales of Suspense, some cap pages. There's some great ones out there. Well, Kirby was prolific. I actually think the majority of Kirby's best work is out there. I mean, it's been seen. Now you could argue that some of his most historic work hasn't. So no one's seen Avengers 4. No one's supposedly seen FF1, right? That's historic, but that's not necessarily his best work. That's historic work. Some of the stuff later, some of his FF pages. I've got a page coming up. That's a different. I think his storytelling was always strong, but the art, the Kirby crackle, all that kind of stuff, that was kind of later on. I think it's later on.
So where do we go from here?
Well, okay, so
Oh, Alberto's
so
having a bad and good night all at the same time.
so Kirby created Captain America, right? Simon and Kirby back in 1941. In 1941, the origin of Captain America was him getting an injection of the super soldier serum, right, which turned him into Captain America. Captain America gets revived in Avengers 4, and then into Tales of Suspense with 59. I think it's 63, where he retells Cap's origin. As long as you can pick it. As long as so I think it's 63. He retells Cap's origin. The big difference between way back when and 63, I think Reinstein became Erskine or whatever it was, that kind of stuff. But the big difference was he drank the super soldier syndrome versus getting the injection, because By that time, the Comic Code Authority had come into the play. And so the Comic Code Authority, and we'll talk about EC in a few minutes, but the Comic Code Authority had rules that said you couldn't show decapitations, you couldn't show, murders, you couldn't show drug use, you couldn't show injections. So that happens. Now we move up. Marvel Universe takes over. You've got Spider-Man, you've got the FF, you've got X-Men, and all these characters now have some sort of radiation power, cosmic powers, things like that. And you get to Cap 109. Cap 109 now retells his origin. Again, this is Kirby retelling his origin really for the third time. But here he makes a critical change. Here he drinks the super soldier syndrome, and then he gets hit with the Vita rays. And that's now brings Cap into the Marvel age, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. There was I think it was called Jordan Schnitzer Art Gallery show. This was one of the pages in it. This is Cap. This is Kirby Crackle. This is Cap. You've got skinny Steve Rogers becoming Captain America. It's the Vita rays, and that becomes now canon, right? I mean, when Byrne retells it, and he's doing it, it's the Vita rays. When they do the movie, it's the Vita rays. I mean, this becomes the canon. But the big change was Kirby and Lee now saying there's something cosmic, there's something more than just that serum that hits them. It's the Vita rays, and that was the difference. That was the difference.
It's an incredible page, Ron.
So for me, that the history nut, right? This is all about the creation of the Marvel Universe, right? That's what this was for me.
Well, I mean, it is a piece of history, and it's spectacular. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you want to see in a museum.
Yeah, I mean, right. And it wasn't a show. We're looking at different, Kirby things, but to me, this was just the way he showed. You don't even need to read anything. You can follow the skinny guy being hit the rays, the powerful, and you see the body transforming in front of you. It's just a powerful page. This is actually
smell that. I have that old comic book smell in my office right now.
Yeah, right.
That's so good. My goodness.
Okay, so
that's the kind of stuff you can look at for a long time, Ron, and just marvel at the fact that you own it. It's just such a. It's wonderful. I mean.
Yeah,
back to the whole idea.
I'm going to hold on to it and curate it until the next person comes. But if you appreciate the history of how the Marvel Universe and comics got created, this to me is a sort of a key point, right? And I just think it was a interesting decision on their part to bring in this invisible, potent Vita rays kind of thing. I think that's just the thing.
It's spectacular.
Because you're screwing around with a character that oh my gosh,
I went way too fast there. Whoa, preview. Didn't mean to do that.
But yeah, it was just a gutsy call, right? Because you're screwing with the history of a character that's been around for, at that point, 25 years.
Right. Who would have thought the Comics Code did some, force them to think differently and change the course of things? I mean, that's it's almost ironic in its own weird way, but it really got the ball rolling. So
speaking of the Comic Code, now we'll go into the
yes, sorry about the preview there, but here, Weird Science. So you're really good. You're moving backwards here.
So again, I'm now appreciating, where did this all come from? How did we get to this stage, right? And so that leads you into EC Comics. EC stands for Educational Comics, and this is a cover, Weird Science cover by Wally Wood. Wally was an incredibly talented, crazy slow artist, but the details he would provide in this stuff is just amazing. And so EC had Weird Science and had horror books, and the publisher was a guy named Bill Gaines. And these comics, the print runs on these were huge. I mean, they dwarfed what even Fantastic Four was doing when in its heyday, and certainly nowadays. I mean, the print runs were huge. Comics were really popular. Um, and the stories were all amazing, and the artists were just top notch. But they were rough. There was people's heads getting chopped off. There were people getting dismembered and killed, and and all sorts of stuff. But there were neat things. So here in this one, EC's adaptation of the story by Ray Bradbury, America's top science fiction writer. Now, the truth of the matter is, they had actually done another story by Ray Bradbury, but they never told Ray Bradbury. They just did the story. And Bradbury, which I think is the coolest part of the story, sent a letter to Bill Gaines saying, "Hey, I saw you adapted my story. I'm sure you forgot, but there's a $50 fee for using my story. If you could just get that check to me when you get a chance." Can you imagine nowadays? Nowadays there would be like 10,000 lawsuits and
I was gonna say, yeah, the lawyer, the letter from the attorney is what's gonna come through first. But
right.
well,
But Bradbury just just typed a note, sent a short note to Bill Gaines. They wrote a check, and then they started adapting more Bradbury stories.
well, it worked out.
So,
Who would have thought? But so was Wood on the list though? Was it? Did you have Wally?
This is where it all went bad, right? So at
Mhm.
this point I blocked in my list, but now as I'm moving further back in history, it's not on my list anymore because these weren't things I read off the stands, right? This was all now diving into the history of comics and how we got there. And so this wasn't on the list. But once I started reading these, well, now I had to go get some of that stuff. And so, I liked war books and westerns, which are not the most popular things. My grandfather came over from Russia when he was 10 years old, and he read comics, and that's how he learned how to speak English. And
Mhm.
so I remember as a little boy, I would go to his place, and he had a stack of war comics and a stack of westerns, and I just had a lot of devotion, mostly the DC books and all that kind of stuff. But here, he had some EC books also, and the sci-fi books and the war books were amazing, amazing stuff. Wally Wood was a revelation for me. I mean, looking at that detail, looking at this stuff, he's got just some amazing, amazing artwork. I've got this Wood cover, and I've got another war cover he did, a Kurtzman war cover. I've got a Wally Wood story, Atom Bomb, which is right, we didn't have enough time to throw these things up, but I would suggest if you want to look at something really neat, go look at that story. The EC stories are all 7 pages each, but the splash of that story is just amazing, just amazing.
In your calf?
In CAF, yeah, it's in CAF.
I'll find it and put a link in the chat for everybody.
Okay, yeah, take a look at it. It's Atom Bomb. But this was Wally Wood was known primarily, although he did the war books, and even some of the Spirit. He was known for sci-fi. His sci-fi stuff, his women and women. Those were 2 things he did a lot of. He was also known as an inker, but his penciling work was. I mean, this is stuff that competes with the detail you'd see today. And this was done in the 50s, right? It's just amazing stuff. So EC, now I'm starting to work my way back and see what's going on. And so anyway, EC does all these comics, huge print runs. There's a guy named Frederick Wertheim who writes a book. He's a psychologist, writes a book called Seduction of the Innocent, which basically postulates that it's all these comics with all this bad stuff in it that's turning our kids into gangsters. There are literally court hearings. There are Senate hearings about banning comics. They wanted to ban comics. You still see that even today. That's why the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, a worthy cause, by the way, if everyone is not members, is still defending people, believe it or not. But this was the creation of the Comic Code Authority, came out of this stuff. Seeing these comics, not so much the weird science ones, although some of that, but people getting their head chopped off, all that kind of stuff. The Comic Code Authority comes in to say, okay, look, we're going to keep comics, but here's this thing. You can't show drug use. You can't show people being killed. There was a list of things, and no one knew who was on that group, but there's Siri, sort of hidden sensors that are tracking that stuff. So all this stuff before the code is open season, really. I mean, you could do kind of pretty much whatever you wanted to do. And so this is the 50s for me.
Yeah, Wally Wood's one of my favorite illustrators. Always will be. I'm looking at the Atom Bomb story on, on CAF right now, and yeah, he was amazing. The style, it was so striking and unique, and yeah, I mean, look at the title on there for Weird Science. It's such a, it grabs you. There's no way you can't stop, and you're not going to stop and look at that book on a newsstand. It's
Right.
it
How could you
so you
not
can
want to
see.
a nuclear
Mhm.
bomb? I mean, you gotta you gotta love it, right? So that started me getting EC stuff, right? So I'm working my way back. This is a splash page from the Spirit. I have this story. I've got 4 or 5 different stories, I think, from Eisner. So people know of or hear about the Eisner Awards from time to time. Um, Will Eisner created this 7-page strip that was put into newspapers. Ran from like 1941 to maybe 52 ish, 51, 52. He was writing, drawing, pretty much doing everything early on. He was also running a studio where he had other people working for him and doing stuff. He then goes and gets drafted into World War II. He writes the stories, he sends them back, and other people are keeping it going while he's in stuff. He comes back after World War II, and at that point, his art has evolved into a whole nother level. And so his work from, say, 46 to 50 um, is groundbreaking in terms of how he does it. Here, the Spirit using the title page, breaking the tail, that was something people had really not done before. He did it in virtually every issue he did. And the Spirit was rough. There was definitely people getting murdered and things like that, because again, we're pre-code. There was also some stuff you look back on now and say, "Oh, that was pretty racist," but he's got that going on too. But these stories are phenomenal. They're collected now. You can get them. You can still buy the comics. Kitchen Sink, Dennis Kitchen, eventually dug them up, worked with Will, and reprinted all these stories.
Mhm.
And the Spirit in some of these stories is actually sort of a slide-line character. They're really creative. They're really neat stories. There's definitely some Ebony on this page, actually. Ebony White, who's a black character who is inappropriately drawn by any stretch of the Spirit. But anyway, but some of the stories are better than others, but they're all just artistically amazing. And again, this is from the 40s now. So now I've worked my way down into the 40s. And there are artists now who copy stuff Eisner did, and I don't know they even know it's coming from Eisner. They may be thinking, "Oh, I'm aping so and so," but he was aping Eisner, right? I mean, Eisner.
Mhm.
So there are issues. Eisner's big thing was rain. They called it Eisner Spritz. When you see issues with stuff there, the use of light and shadow was crazy. He has stories in the snow, how he did it again. Really, just amazing artwork. The other thing he did was he owned his artwork. He ran his own studio, and so one thing what he was more than anybody else, he was a really good businessman. So if you go back to Siegel and Schuster, who basically signed away the rights to Superman for $130, and we'll talk about Kirby in a second. Left brain, right brain, right? Eisner had both. He ran a studio. He kept his artwork. He made money. He did things that were profitable, and that's what he did. After doing the Spirit, he moved on and actually did work for the government, writing a preventive maintenance magazine, essentially through cartoons showing people how to take care of their military equipment. He's also well known for doing some graphic novels. The first big graphic novel was Contract with God. I've got a page out of that was actually used as the cover for the book Paul Levitz wrote about not the first graphic novels. But the reason that the Eisner Awards exist is because he had such a dramatic and lasting impact on the history of comics. And again, comics at this time were okay stuff. They weren't where people wanted to be. Comics were not a great place to be as compared to syndicated comics, the cartoon, the strips. Strip art is where the high quality stuff was getting done, not so much in these comic strips, in these comic books.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said earlier, people who were collecting original art in the early 70s were more focused on the strip art. That was the thing that was most memorable and to them more valuable artistically, more impressive than the comic book artwork. And, it took like 10 years and a few releases from the bigger publishers to get that artwork out there before it got appreciated. But yeah, I've read that a lot, right? That strip art was where it was at. Anybody who was doing comics at this time, their goal was to get onto a syndicated strip. This is a stepping stone for them.
We'll talk about that in a couple minutes, but yeah, that's right. That was the way to go. All right, I probably made this okay. So this is not in my CAF, but it's a little surprise, I guess. This is, if you're looking close, Tales of Suspense 39. This was the origin of Iron Man. As the story goes, so this whole story was actually on eBay for a while. No one bought it, and then at some point it disappeared. It's since been being released, maybe a page at an auction. So I think it's maybe a 12, 13 page story, right? And I think maybe 8 of the pages. When I first started seeing pages coming out, this was this page I wanted. Now, someone might look at it and say, there's no Iron Man on the page, and I get that. But that doesn't matter to me. This is the page where Tony Stark trips the tripwire and the explosion goes off, sending the shrapnel in and around his heart. This is to me, this is the page of all the pages in the book. This is the page, or in the story. This is the page I wanted. The last panel. He's a famous inventor. How is he? Much shrapnel near his heart, impossible to operate. Cannot live longer than 1 week. This is the beginning of that, right? This is where it all starts. And it's funny. There's a lot of talk now about first appearance and all that. And I think I've got some first appearance stuff in my collection, I guess. But I think for the real first appearance collectors, it's a different world than it is if you collect comics, right? If you collect comics and you want the first appearance of Iron Man, go get a Tales of Suspense 39. They're down the street. They're on eBay. They're everywhere. You can get all sorts of that. But here, there's only 12 or 13 pages in the story. Only 8 of them come out. I know maybe 1 or 2 people, they have 2 of them. So now you're just not going to get that, right? So now you got to say to yourself, oh, well, I want the second appearance of Iron Man, or the third appearance of Iron Man, or the fourth appearance. But okay, that's good for you. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's good for you. But is that more important? Does that look better to you than some other page, right? So there's some, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But if you try and convince me that the third appearance is so much more important than this other story, that's probably not going to win with me, right? The origin of this, to me, was historic, and a chance to get to this history in a twice up page. Don Heck did the art. I also think Heck is maligned a little bit. I have some other Heck stuff I think is pretty good, but I actually don't have much of his romance art, but it's phenomenal, actually. But to me, this page, when I saw that story was coming out, I said, this is the page I want. Every page is great in the story, But this is the page I want, not the first appearance of Tony Stark or Pepper Potts or the whatever. This is the page I want. Is the Iron Room tripwire.
And you got it. That's the thing.
And I did.
You had a goal. You added it to the spreadsheet, or at least the mental spreadsheet, and you got to add it to your collection. I mean, I think that's great. And the other pages are nice too. But I see why this is important to you. I mean, it's actually the composition's great. The camera angles and views on the characters are wonderful. I love those first two panels. They're it's amazing, and the lettering too. I mean, it's fun when you look at the lettering on a page like this, because they're putting those balloons in early and everything, and some of the balloons have a little too much space in them because it's just they're still figuring out how to do these things right. But yeah, I love this page, really.
Yeah. All right, let's see.
What is? There you go.
Okay, so this is Sky Masters. Now, I have some more strip art in my thing. Sky Masters is probably the most important worst comic strip ever made. but if not for Sky Masters, there is no Marvel Universe. This is the best way to say that. So the story goes like this. Kirby is working for DC. He's doing Challengers of the Unknown at that point, right? And trying to make some money. And one of his editors, I think Schiff is the last name, says, "Hey, they're trying to start a new syndicated comic strip. Are you interested?" And of course, Kirby leaps at it, right? Because this is his chance to get to the upper level. I mean, he's working in comics. He's basically one step above the gutters working in comics. But his dream is to become Hal Foster, who's doing Prince Valiant, or Milton Caniff, who's doing Terry and the Pirates, or Alex Raymond, who's doing Flash Gordon, or Gould, Little Abner. These are big names, right? He wants to be the big name doing this stuff. And so this now, it says Kirby Wood. Interestingly enough, it's inked by Wally Wood, but that's not Wally Wood. In other words, the writers are two brothers, Dick and Dave Wood, and that's the Kirby Wood on the
okay. So
little known trivia piece. But he does get Wally Wood to ink this, and Wood, as we saw, is detailed, especially in space. And this is in sort of 1958, 59, right, when this is happening, and if you think about it, it's the ideal time for this kind of strip. It's a spaceman strip, but no aliens. It's designed to be much more realistic. There are spies and space stations and things like that. But this is now right before the Mercury astronauts. This is going to be take off, right? It's going to be the big deal. Kirby was a tremendously prolific and creative artist. He was a horrible businessman, and that sadly was proven year after year after year of poor decisions. In this case, Schiff gives him this opportunity, and they agree that Jack, if he gets the deal, will give some of his royalties to Schiff. He hires Wally Wood. They start on it. It gets to like 300 newspapers. It starts growing, and it's rocking along. Schiff then calls and says, "Jack, where's my royalties? You promised me royalties." And Jack says, "I'll send you a fruit basket. Thanks for helping me out." And Schiff sues him. So it goes to court. It goes to court, and they're still cranking away in this thing, making money. And it goes to court, and there are letters, there are documents saying that Jack's gonna give him this. Jack argues, "Well, he was my editor. I was under duress that I had to do this." But he loses. He loses big time, and so now he has to pay all the royalties, or a chunk of the royalties, over to Schiff. Well, that means he's not making near as much money. He can't really afford Wally Wood because he was sharing some of the money with Wally Wood, and he's sharing with Dick and Dave Wood, right? Because they're writing it. So now he starts thinking it's some of himself, but now he needs to make more money. So he's got to go figure out what to do. what does he do? He can't go back to DC because he hates Schiff and he thinks Schiff screwed him. So what does he do? He calls up Stan Lee and then he goes over to join Marvel. If this comic strip was a success, if he didn't have to get out of it because he was paying Schiff, who knows what would happen to this? But he was not going back to there was no Marvel Universe. There's actually a great, I think Hermes Press put out a book summarizing all the Sundays. Baron Delgado, I think, helped when he was on the board, put it together. And he wrote an interesting article in there where he postulated what the Marvel Universe would have looked like, where it would have, had Ditko and some other people, but not Kirby. But I don't know. So it's a neat thing to see. The artwork's fantastic, but historically, it's the crash and burn of this comic strip that really created the Marvel Universe.
Incredible. I've always wanted a page from the strip, but because a lot of pages have them on Earth, doing research or a lot of talking head pieces. But I have always wanted them in space. I don't care. That's what I gotta have, and those are the ones everybody wants. But no, I mean they're a joy to look at, and I know you're right. I've got a copy of the Hermes Press book around here someplace. So it was.
Brian just pointed out Hermes did the dailies.
Oh, the dailies only? Okay, then that's the one I have.
Somebody else printed the Sundays because I've got the book.
I'll have to look into that.
I have both of the books. But anyway, I have other strip art, and I think we have one more after this. But to me, just from a historical perspective, it's his poor decision that led to the Marvel Universe, and I just think that's kind of a crazy, neat story.
Well, fate.
This is Flash Gordon, Alex Raymond, I think 1939. So again, I grew up on Sundays. They had the black and white, Flash Gordon on TV. He was Buster Crabbe and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you'd see these things. It never occurred to me that Flash Gordon was a comic strip. I mean, that's where it came from, right? So Alex Raymond gets the Marcus wrote large art. That's right. This is much bigger than this is probably the size of 2 twice-up pieces of art, by the way. They worked in pretty big scale. And Raymond was a master draftsman. He gets the assignment to create a strip to compete with Buck Rogers, which was already out there in the 30s, like in 34, and creates Flash Gordon. And the early parts of his run, these are big Sunday strips. They're beautiful. They look like illustrations in old time books. It's beautiful stuff. They call it the sort of the dry brush style. But as the time evolved, as he got into the later 30s and before he headed off to war, he started changing how he inks. So this ink looks a lot like the inking looks a lot like what he did later on in Rip Kirby when he came back from World War II. The guy creates Flash Gordon. He then goes into the army, serves in World War II, sees combat in World War II, gets back and says, I'm ready to take back my comic strip. And they say, somebody else has been doing it for a while. Why don't you try something else? And he goes and creates Rip Kirby. And that's, again, these artists were kind of, pushed around a little bit. They didn't have control, although, Raymond was Raymond. So the use of light and shadow and what he did with the water, and you're even on the boots, the shininess of the boots, right? I mean, think how much time and thought goes into doing some of these panels. I mean, the faces, this is not a, half-assed whatever. I mean, this is him penciling and inking everything. This middle panel on the bottom, to me, is just a master class in how to show water. I mean, it's just, and this is the kind of guy that Kirby's looking at saying, I want to do this. I want to be thought of like that guy. So, But what can you do? What can you do?
Wow. And number one Marvel fan, I did not pick these pieces at all. This was Ron scripted the path through this. This was
What I was
his
hoping,
idea.
and I appreciate anyone who's hung on this long. We have one more. But what I was trying to do is I thought show kind of my collecting journey, like how I got to where I got to, and how I thought about things and what I was looking
No,
at the time.
it was very well thought out, Ron. I mean, I appreciate it. Clearly, everybody in the chat has appreciated it tonight as well, because we're getting an education, in the business, which is always fun. And we don't get to talk about these things too often, but you're very knowledgeable. And yeah, I mean, I think we could have you back on, next time we want to do a deep dive on something. You
Deep
just
dive.
let what topics you might like to talk about and show off, and I'd be happy to have you back on. But I did put a link, that because you do have 48 Alex Raymond pieces in your CAF gallery, which may not be all that you own, but if anybody wants to go over and look at them, there's plenty to look at.
The last piece I threw in here just to prove that I'm reading comics on a daily basis. This is actually Bilquis Evely. This is Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, issue 3. So, and I just met her at San Diego this past year. She was there with Matt Lopes. I'm trying to think is the colorist. I'm trying to remember who did the work on that. Both wonderful people. This is Tom King's story, and I read these stories and I thought this was just phenomenal. I mean, everything about the story. And this is issue 3. Issue 3 is actually kind of maybe a quieter story, but I loved it. I love the artwork on it, and ironically, this page and a couple other pages have been used as back covers and posters and some other things like that. Bilquis Evely is just a phenomenal artist, and the storytelling is just terrific. I think they're talking about using Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow as the basis for the Supergirl movie. Who knows what piece of that? It's 8 issues, right? So they're gonna have to pick and choose what pieces they are. But I love this story, and so Felix is one of the who reps her. I was able to buy the whole story.
Oh wow!
And for me, again, I'm reading it, I buy it. This is what I think I like. I like the whole story, just like I did with this Hayden Sherman thing. But I thought the artwork here was phenomenal. The story was amazing. There was just everything about it was just delightful. And the nice thing about the whole story, for me, back when I was buying the Finch pages from Avengers, the problem I had was when I would show a civilian the page, I'd have to say, "Here's the page." Hawkeye says the funniest thing here, but it's not the same, right? Versus if you hand somebody a page from that's older, where all the words on it, they can look at it and say, "Oh my gosh, that's whatever." Here, you don't have the words on the page, but when you have the pages and you can page through it, if they're a solid storyteller, which is a talent, not every artist. There's some great artists that aren't great necessary storytellers. Bilquis is a solid storyteller. Hayden Sherman's a solid storyteller. You know what's going on in that story by just doing it when there's no words in it, and that's a talent. That's a talent. But I wanted to close on this just to. I know I went on memory lane here, done a history thing, but I am buying new stuff, and I haven't put this one in my CAF either, but it's a great story. And if you haven't read the trade, it's fantastic.
I have not, but I'll add that to my list. Now,
You should add it to your list.
Speaking of the list, so
Yeah.
is that list still out there, and are there still a few things that you haven't done the strike through on that line yet?
There are a couple things which I may or may not ever get to, but my problem is that I'll find another that is
what are you pointing at? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wish I could
So that's a New
99.
Frontier page. I love the New
Yep.
Frontier. That I got added that to my list. I've got a bunch of New Frontier pages, but I didn't really have a good Batman page. And this one came up for auction recently, John Cassaday's collection. And boy, I wanted a Batman page on that story. So that's my problem. I mean, I have the attention span of a Cocker Spaniel, right? I got to keep moving on. So
There's nothing wrong
anyway,
with that. I saw a copy of what is that, Rom 1 and on the back shelf too. Or,
that's the only graded book I have. It was a gift from some good friends. Ron. I liked Ron.
well, you have 18 pieces of Rom art in your
Well,
CAF
actually,
gallery too.
that's the complete story from number 3.
Oh, okay. There is the cover. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, wow.
it's a cover from a later issue, but it's the
Oh,
complete
later at 49. Got it.
complete. I think it's the only complete issue of Rom around that I've seen.
Did you buy it complete?
I did. Yep.
Okay.
I got it
It
from.
wasn't one where you had to like find one page or out there.
No, I unfortunately I have a series of those where I'm trying to look for a page here and a page there. It's a fool's errand, but I haven't given up yet.
Oh, well, keyword searches will be your friend. I mean, but yeah, we know many people who are trying to put books together.
Yeah.
It is a challenge. But Ron, this was absolutely enjoyable tonight, and I really do think we need to have you on again sometime. I mean, it's this was really wonderful. I think that your collection is impressive. The journey getting here, I mean, going from the low of losing all the comics to the store that shut down. I mean, having to sell your art for the keeping the family happy in the house, looking bright and cheerful. I mean, all that stuff, are things that I think every collector has to go through, and in the time that they're in the hobby, if they've been in it for any length of time.
No
So
Bob Kane. Sorry, no Bob Kane.
no Bob Kane. Marcus loves wondering. Well, yeah, we know that whole story there. But anyways, again, it's this was fun. Ron, really was, and I'd welcome you to come back anytime. I mean, I think we can probably come up
Glad
with
I could
some.
do it. Thank you for inviting me. This was great. And again, thanks for keeping CAF going. And I talked to a lot of the people online here at different times. And again, if there's people, if anyone that's watching has questions, if I can help out, glad to do it. Always glad to help collectors.
Yeah, Ron's gallery link is in the description for those who are watching this on the rewind and whatnot. Be sure to check out Ron's CAF Gallery. And like he said, if you got a question that you think he might be able to answer, shoot him an email through his CAF Gallery. Very, very knowledgeable, Ron. So thank you for doing this. And again, it was an absolute pleasure getting to hang out with you tonight and talk about your collecting journey.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you. Take care.
All right, everybody. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you